Good evening, and thank you, Amanda. I'd like to welcome you all to Community Voices, a monthly program that explores in depth the individuals and groups and historical events that help inform the character of our local area. The series grew out of a desire to better unite us by bridging our differences. Each month, we'll focus on a singular aspect of life in our community. We hope you'll join us regularly as we highlight the people, the customs, the folklore of life in the Westerly Pawcatuck area. This program is for and about you. Please contact us if you have a story to tell. Tonight, I would like to welcome Steve Briganti, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation, created to restore and help maintain these two great national monuments. He was chosen by founding Chairman Lee Iacocca in 1982 to launch and manage the organization's activities, including fundraising and marketing initiatives, and overseeing all related construction projects. Under his leadership, the foundation has raised more than $800 million, all from the private sector, making it one of the most successful public and private partnerships in the history of the United States. In addition to restoring the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island, Briganti led the development of 220,000 square foot Ellis Island National Immigration Museum, created the American Immigrant Wall of Honor program, and established a 25 million American Family Immigration History Center and the 100 million Statue of Liberty Museum on Liberty Island. What an amazing accomplishments, and these are certainly places that if you have not visited, you must make it part of your future travel. Thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Lou. I'm very happy to be with you this evening and all the people in the Rhode Island area. One of the places that was a recipient of millions of immigrants, and certainly amongst those larger number of Italians. We'll start our conversation off tonight by just locating, for those of you who don't know where it is, here is a map that shows you where Ellis Island is and where the Statue of Liberty is in New York Harbor. And you can get there by a boat from the Battery or from Liberty State Park in New Jersey. Normally, we get about 4.5 million people a year. Sadly, in this last year, that has not been the case. The islands were closed much of the time, but they are open now. And if you were to go now, put aside that guy standing in the way, behind it is the Great Hall of Ellis Island. This was the place that if you were an immigrant to the United States through the Port of New York between 1892 and 1924, you came into this room. So you have to imagine a room full of thousands of people. On the busiest day, 12,000 people in April of 1907, but a normal day, about 5,000 people. You can only imagine the noise, the fear, the concern, the anxiety. Will I make it through? Will I pass the test? Well, as it turned out, only about 2% of the people who came did not make it through, and they didn't make it through for either legal or health reasons. But they were allowed, there was a hospital there, and they were allowed to be cured, and they were allowed to go before a judge. So most people got in. All right, now we're moving on about the Statue of Liberty Foundation. Could we go back? There we are. No, forward. Guess we're just going to run back and forth. There. Here are the manifests. Happens to be my family. And my cousin happens to be, no slings and darts, please, but the mayor of New York. And so you can see that we all arrived between 1895 and 1922 from southern Italy. All right, and this manifest, you can find your manifest if you go to statueofliberty.org and follow the directions to the manifests. If you came through the Port of New York in those years that I mentioned, it's very, very likely that you will find a record of your family's arrival. The one flaw is that they may have changed their names. So if they changed their names once they got here, then you won't find them because you won't know what their name was when they left Italy or Poland or wherever they came from. All right, let's move on. It's our logo. We're going to talk a little bit about the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. We're the organization, as was mentioned. Here you see a picture of Mr. Iacocca being appointed by President Reagan. The idea was to raise the money privately for the restoration of both monuments, with the Statue of Liberty being done by her 100th anniversary in 1986. So President Reagan felt Lee Iacocca, who of course was at that point in time probably the most celebrated man in America, as a businessman who would turn Chrysler around, would be a great leader of this event. And you might notice here in the lower corner, Mr. Iacocca escorting Sophia Loren for a visit to Ellis Island. And again, the Great Hall in the background. And here on the other side, the picture of the awning. There was an awning on the original Ellis Island building, but it was not a very pretty one. So we decided historically to have an awning, but to make it so that you could see the rest of the beautiful building. And I think you'll agree with me when you've gone there that the building was really built to impress the immigrants who were coming to this country. Here we have a little bit of the Statue of Liberty between 1982 and 1986. Actually, the picture on the left, the one that the arrow is indicating, was taken before 1982. The Statue of Liberty, or Liberty Island, was originally a fort and part of the Department of War. The statue was sort of clumped into the middle of it, and it wasn't until Franklin Roosevelt in the 1940s made it a national park that they began to get rid of all these buildings around the Statue of Liberty. So that the island today, other than a couple of buildings for food, is just all the Statue of Liberty, and now we've built the Statue of Liberty Museum. The middle picture is our the world's tallest freestanding scaffolding, which we had to put up to take down the original torch. The original torch was beyond repair. So we had to build a new one. Ironically, the torch had been changed a number of times, and here you see workers preparing to take the original torch down. And in fact, it's coming down on the side picture. The original torch had windows carved in it, which you see there. So the new torch that we built is actually looking more like the original torch than the original torch itself. But you can see and get very close to the original torch in the new Statue of Liberty Museum on Liberty Island. Some more workers, again, with the torch and preparing to take it down. It came down pretty quickly there. Here we are on, there you go, there's, all right, well, let's zero in on the picture of the president. We had a huge celebration on July 4th, 1986. President Reagan came, President Mitterrand of France came, many, many dignitaries came for tall ships, the world's largest fireworks display, the largest concert in the history of Central Park, and then a final show at Giant Stadium. So it was quite a weekend. 6 million people had come to New York during that weekend to enjoy the festivities. And that at that point, the Statue of Liberty was rededicated. Now, fast forward about 30 years. When 9/11 took place, people were prohibited from seeing much of the inside of the Statue of Liberty, including a little museum that we had built inside the Statue of Liberty during its restoration. So it was decided that we would build a museum, expand on the story of the Statue of Liberty's development and its arrival and its meaning to America as a national symbol. And here is the brand new, not so brand new anymore. It was opened in May of 2019. And then, of course, sadly closed down as the virus struck in 2020. It is now open. There's the original torch, lots of exhibitry, lots of stories, a copy of the face, the actual size of the foot and the face of the Statue of Liberty are there for your enjoyment. And I urge you to come. The museum is now open and it's very carefully tended to with the healthiest of guidelines to keep everybody safe. There are still some exhibits that you can't touch, but it's worth seeing, and the crowds are not as normally big as they are not as big as they normally are. So back to Ellis Island. Here you see a picture of Ellis Island, probably in the 19-teens or 1920s. And on the right, on the other side, my right, which must be your left, is the new Ellis Island National Museum of Immigration, which is not so new anymore. It was opened in 1990, but it's had 4 or 5 additions to it, telling more of the story of immigration. Here you see sort of a combination of what we found when we got there. It was a ruin. Trees were growing in the Great Hall. There was an old wooden staircase. This was gone by the time we got there, but we did put a staircase back to celebrate the history of the importance of the staircase, because there were doctors all along it, looking at you as you came up and trying to judge whether you were breathing heavily, or you might have some disease, or you might have trouble with your eyes. That would mean maybe trachoma of the eyes. And the United States did not want people to become wards of the state. So if there were health reasons or legal reasons, you weren't allowed in. Here you see the juxtaposition of the old Great Hall versus the restored Great Hall. The restored Great Hall is more of what the immigrants saw. The other Great Hall is what we found when we got there. And then you see the people lined up to be processed. As I said before, on the busiest day, about 12,000, but normally about 5,000 a day. And you have to sort of immerse yourself in what it must have felt like for them. They were leaving a place that they knew, that they were leaving family. They were coming to a place they didn't know, a language they probably didn't know, and they didn't have jobs, but they had faith. And of course, they had faith in the wonders of this country and its ability to house them, which in fact it did. Again, the front entrance to the Ellis Island Museum. We're going to talk a little bit about the peak immigration years of 1892 to 1924. If you had ancestors who came through Ellis Island, this was probably the period of time that they came. Not that they couldn't have come before or after, but this was a time with the development of the steamship that made it possible for more people to travel and for communication to be better. Now, they weren't picking up their cell phone and calling their relative in New York, but there was more information about what life was like in the United States. And so many people from all over the world decided to take their chance on us. And my family being one of them, I think maybe many of yours. Here, you'll see these in the museum. There are things that they brought with them. This is a dormitory building in the center. You can see the baggage. Many of them came with mattresses filled with things. In fact, I asked my mother, who didn't remember arriving because she was a year old, but did you have anything, do you know anything that you brought? And she said, well, we always had this mattress that we aired out in the spring. And more than likely, their belongings, because they came steerage class, were in that blanket, in that mattress, and they were bringing it to this country. Now, by 1924, there are several different periods of immigration. There is the first period of immigration, which of course were the Native Americans, who were actually immigrants who came down from Russia and in many cases moved east. Usually we move the other direction. But then after the Native Americans, what people that came were primarily Northern and Western Europeans, primarily Protestants. Then that began to change in the 1880s as people from Southern and Eastern Europe and from the Middle East began to come. And that was the heavy migration of Italian period, starting in 1880 and going into, in 1924, the people who were in Congress decided that they'd had enough of these Eastern and Southern Europeans who were primarily Catholics and Jews. So they took the quotas back to 1880, and that slowed down Italian immigration in 1924. Then came, of course, the Depression and the war. People weren't immigrating then. And once both those were over with, the immigration began again. And it actually goes on through today with different people coming from different places. But it's interesting that there were people who they didn't want to come. My family was probably one of them. But fortunately, we came. All right, let's move on. Here are some of the reasons that probably you already know. Primarily financial betterment. There were opportunities here, and they came to fill those opportunities. And once one member of the family would come, others would come. In my father's family, there were 5, and 4 came and 1 did not. Often the men would come alone, either to earn money to bring the rest of their families over, or to go back and get their to get a marriage and bring that person with them. Of course, there are stories of people who never went back and who had wives in both places, but there weren't that many of those. A little bit about the Italians. Of course, we all know Verrazzano, who is the first recorded visitor of European descent to visit Rhode Island. At least that's what they've told us. He christened it Rhode, R-H-O-D-E Island. The first Italians to come were Northern, primarily because they were looking to invest, as is still the case today. The northern part of Italy is wealthier than the southern part of Italy. So thousands of Northern Italians came during the period before the great rush of Italians. Then, as I've said before, in the 1880s, millions of Italians came to America. And that went on again until 1924, but then picked up again after the Depression and the war. So about 5.5 million Italians came to America. But if you could extrapolate that out today, it's quite a large population. The Ellis Island experience is what we want you to have at Ellis Island. We saved as much of the museum as possible, or as much of the buildings as possible, at the same time trying to make a modern day museum with air conditioning and ability to save artifacts. So it's not quite as plebeian as it might have been when our ancestors arrived on a number of ships, 2 of them shown here, the Saturnia and the Oceana, which plowed from usually from Genoa or Naples to New York. Again, people arriving. If we could go back just one where they were giving the eye test, where they were looking at the eye, here. Everybody went through this health inspection. One of the main diseases of the day was a disease of the eyes. It was highly contagious. And so they were very careful to look at people's eyes to make sure that they didn't have it before they would let them into the country. Then you see them going through probably getting their papers checked. They also experienced their first American meals. And needless to say, they ran across a number of foods that they didn't know and were afraid to eat, not unlike kids today who say, well, I don't know what that is, I don't want to eat it, but eventually became part of their diet. There was a classroom at Ellis Island. If children were kept there for a while, they were taught. In the middle, you see dormitories. People were kept overnight. If their ship got in late, they couldn't be processed. The island didn't stay open all night, but they were housed in a rather large dormitory, probably not the pleasantest of night, most pleasant of nights, but that's what it was. And then you see the dining hall with, again, people preparing for their meal, probably eating things that they'd never known, never experienced before. They did, one thing that Ellis Island tried to do was welcome people to this country. So and also to prepare them to be Americans. So they celebrated Christmas. If they were stuck on Ellis Island for Christmas, it wasn't such a bad day because they had a nice meal and a Christmas tree, and they were given food and water and things to drink. So there was the attempt to make people feel at home, people who were probably a little bit, more than a little bit, probably somewhat frightened. Our oral history project, we've been keeping it going for years. We have oral histories from probably every country on earth. Certainly a number of Italian oral histories. And the reason for this is obviously we didn't want time to get lost without having them. And this is something that I urge everybody, because we didn't do it in my own family, if you can believe this or not, was to ask the elders the stories of their family. By the time we got around to asking, it was too late. They were conflicting stories. Nobody was sure what was what. But this is one of the most important things you can do, is to write down your family story while the elders are still alive. Whether they were immigrants or whatever their story is, you should know them for the next generation. We can't really know who we are unless we know where we've come from. Now, we've talked about the positive sides of immigration. Needless to say, there was a great deal of anti-immigration. Don't speak my language, don't come. We don't want Catholics and Jews. We don't want Asians. We don't want, well, of course, there was a period when they didn't want Italians, or they didn't want Irish. Probably every group has felt the sting of anti-immigration. And yet the amazing thing is that while there was anti-immigration against anybody who looked different or sounded different, we have always maintained this custom of being a nation of immigrants. So it's a dichotomy that I've always found interesting, that we don't want certain kinds of people to come. Once they get here, they become part of the mainstream. And time goes on, their families become Americanized, as families during this period tried very hard to become Americanized. I should mention one of the myths that doesn't really have anything to do with anti-immigration, but almost everybody thinks their name got changed at Ellis Island. And in fact, very few, if any, names got changed at Ellis Island. Because you were processed, the manifest you see on the side, you were processed by the ship's manifest, which was made up of what you told them. So when you got on the ship in Naples, if you said your name was Briganti, that's the name that you were processed with when you arrived at Ellis Island. The Brigantis never changed their names, but many, many immigrants, not just Italian immigrants, but immigrants from all over, anglicized their names once they became citizens because they felt they would fit in better. I don't think we do that anymore, and I think that's good that we don't do it anymore, because people brought a great deal of value with their heritage to this country. And where would we have Italian dinners if it hadn't been for the Italians? The British weren't into pasta, I don't believe. Anyway, you can discover your own roots at Ellis Island with either a visit or contacting us at statueofliberty.org to do your investigation of your manifest. And I'll tell you, I worked on this for 6 years. When I finally found my family, and by the way, I've never found my father, so it's not a guarantee. Not my father, my grandfather. I've never found his record, and I've had everybody that has ever done record searching looking for it. But the other members of my family I have found. It is quite an emotional moment when you see that your grandmother arrived in the port of New York in 1903 with $1 to her name. So this is the manifest of Nicola Iacocca, who was the father of Lee Iacocca, who actually went back and forth 4 times. And on the 4th time, brought his new wife, Lee Iacocca's mother, with him. So you will find these things, and you'll find some interesting things that you might not have known about. We do offer dedicated passenger searches, so we're not miracle workers. We can't find it if it's not there. And as I said, we can't find my father, my grandfather, but we can find many of them. And if you go to statueofliberty.org, to the dedicated passenger search and follow the format, we will help you find your manifest. It really has been a good service to people. There is a fee of $50, but it's been a good service to people to be able to have this help. So the dedicated passenger search, along with the wall, if you haven't honored your ancestors on the wall, here's a picture of it today, you really should, because this will live in posterity. We have an endowment that takes care of the wall, that makes sure it's clean. We're a victim of seagulls often, but we clean it up. And it's a thrill to see your ancestor's name or your family name on this wall. At a national monument, it doesn't happen very often.
And Steve, explain to them the genesis of it and the relation to Rhode Island.
Oh, yes. A very interesting genesis to it. We had wanted to find a way to honor people who had, just the way this wall looks, who had come to America. We wanted to do it at a price that their ancestors, their descendants could afford. So $100. And we didn't know how to start it until one day we got a telephone call from a family in Providence. And I'm sorry that we didn't keep the name of this family, but they're on the wall somewhere. But they were having a family reunion. And they asked us if we had anything that we could give them. And we didn't. So I said to our head of PR, let's draw up a certificate and put their name on, and really this will be an experiment. So we did, but we asked them one thing. Could we ask the Providence Journal to cover this family reunion? It's quite a large reunion. And they said yes. So the Providence Journal put this story on the front page of their newspaper. This would have been in 1988. And we got thousands of letters from people from the Providence area asking us if they could do the same thing for their family. So we said, of course. We used this pattern, this formula, in cities and towns across the country. As I said, we raised millions of dollars, and thousands of people put their names on the wall. So it stems back to Providence. Maybe if some of your family, that would be wonderful if it were, but there are a lot of people from Rhode Island on the wall. We have some references if you're interested. We just zoomed by them. This is where most of our information comes from. And the immigration information in the museum is all reviewed by a committee of immigration scholars from universities all over the country. The Bureau of the Census provides us with numbers. And so we're able to tell you a lot about groups of people that came to this country, including, of course, the Italians. Okay, so now I think it's time for questions and answers, Lou. Is that where we are? Yes.
Yes, Stephen, that was great. Really, really wonderful. Having been there, I knew some of that information, but I learned probably twice as much as I knew. So I really appreciate hearing that. One of the things that I wondered about, this is a practical kind of question. You talked about the dedicated search. And then earlier you referred to changes in spelling. If someone were to make that $50 donation for a dedicated search, and encounter some difficulty because of a spelling change. For example, my family, I have a couple of relatives who spell their Toscano with T-U-S-C-A-N-O. When someone does a dedicated search, how do they kind of rectify that?
Well, they don't. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
It is what they landed with were processed with, whether it was right or wrong, it's their name. And unless they changed it when they became citizens, it stayed that way. Yeah. I mean, there are so many fascinating stories. I'll tell you another one completely separate. A well-known businessman, I won't give you his name, his family came from Lebanon. They were headed to a town in South Carolina. The train went through a town by the same name in North Carolina, and they got out there thinking they were where they were supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the story of immigration. Lots of strange things happen, including names. So whatever name is on the manifest is the name that will stay on the manifest. Now you can make a note when you're getting this that the name was either incorrect or changed, but it's not going to change on the manifest.
Right.
And what our researchers will recommend is checking a few different spellings if you're not sure.
Yes.
And that's guidance that they provide. Yeah.
Oh, they provide the checking of the spelling and also the town that the person came from. That's another big clue. That's actually how I found my grandmother, is through the town, not by her name, because they had misspelled her name and also marked her down as a man.
Wow.
And I asked one of our lead historians, how could this happen? Well, women often didn't travel alone, nor did they show up to sign up alone. She was traveling with several of her cousins, if they were in fact her cousins, I don't know. But that's what happened in her case. So she had her first name and her last name misspelled, and she was identified as a man. Now, it could have been that they were not welcoming in 1903 to single women traveling alone. So maybe she teamed up with these people, or maybe they really were her cousins. We'll never know.
And I'd like to say a little bit more about the dedicated passenger search Steve spoke about. So if with that, if we are not able to find your ancestors, you receive a discount from the gift shop. But if you are, and regardless whether we find the information or not, our researchers will share their research process with you, so you could take that information to inform you as you go on in your genealogical journey.
Great.
Everybody thought when we did this record center that all their information would just pop up. Well, of course it doesn't. We get the information from the National Archives, which has the copies of the manifests on tape. And so whatever you signed up with, that's what went to the National Archives, and that's what's in our center.
You know, on that, I just thought about this as you were talking, Suzanne. Is there, maybe not now because of the situation, but is there a way for a person to do this one-on-one with somebody from the Ellis Island Foundation, one of the people that do the research, or is it all done through the online method?
It's online. You can search. Our database is free via our website. And if you go to Ellis Island and actually visit the actual center, there's a minor fee, and you don't sit down one-on-one with our researchers. They're there to answer questions, and they encourage people to come with as much information as they can gather beforehand. That aids in your research clearly. Our colleagues tell us often that someone will come in and, I don't know, my grandma Betsy came over in 1907. How do we find her? You know, well, we need to know a little bit about Betsy. So just we always try to encourage people to gather information. And if you look on our website and even on the dedicated passenger search form, you'll see the questions that you should try to find. And by no means do you need all of them, but having a sense of the time of when they may have arrived, or the port of departure. And Steve and I were speaking with someone the other day, and he told us how that his family lore had his family coming here through a different port at a different time. And when he found his manifest, it changed the family story, going back to what Steve was saying about not capturing these stories when you can. So it is interesting what it unfolds, and it's a great first step for people as they're exploring where they came from and where they ended up.
Family history is a very, very interesting thing to get yourself involved in, because it's a story of you. I always say that the Ellis Island Museum is the story of people. There aren't any other museums that are the story of people.
Right.
So these are the stories of people. And by the way, lots of people come. We do have a center, as Suzanne said, at Ellis Island, where you can do your research sitting right there with the help of someone. And many people come there because they want to do it on the spot where their ancestors had arrived.
Right. So we did have at least one question. Somebody wanted to know how Bob Hope got associated with the library.
Well, that actually, Bob Hope was an Ellis Island immigrant. And Congress actually passed a law that the library at Ellis Island should be named for him. So that's how that happened.
Oh, okay. And you know, there's another reference to the dedicated search. It's not let's see. Can you do it online with a person, like with back and forth?
No, we don't offer that service. I learned today, another colleague of ours, we were just talking about working one-on-one with a genealogist.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's one paid service where just to get through the door, it's $2,000, which
Wow.
seems crazy. But no, so that's what how we work it is you submit the form and you will hear from our researchers because undoubtedly they'll have follow-up questions. So in some cases they have some chat on the phone, but it certainly isn't a step-by-step walkthrough.
Sure, sure. Stephen, somebody asked a question about what other ports were there other than Ellis Island where people entered the country?
There were
Either
actually,
Italian or Irish?
yes, there were actually a number of ports. Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston, New Orleans, Galveston, Texas, and San Francisco. But the predominant port, with about 70% of the immigration, was through the Port of New York. And the primary reason for that is that initially, immigrants were sort of a second thought. They had all this space down by the steering compartment. They couldn't put cargo down there, so they put people down there, sold spots for people to come. And so many people came through other ports, but nowhere in, no comparison to the number of people that came through New York.
You know, you mentioned anti-immigration policies and how there was you know, some discrimination against the people that they didn't want to enter the country. But can you talk a little bit about the discrimination that, well, you know, I mean, we're talking about Italian Americans, but many immigrants faced once they arrived. I mean, it wasn't, you know, piece of cake when the Italians got here, I'm sure.
No, it was not. I think it could sum up in one story. The story of the Italian immigrant who came here because he heard the streets were paved with gold.
Yeah.
And when he got here, he found out that the streets were not paved with gold. In fact, they weren't paved. In fact, he was expected to pave them. Needless to say, most of the people who came through Ellis Island were poor, which probably meant that they didn't have much education. And at that time in America, there were lots and lots. We were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And this country was expanding rapidly, and we needed people to come. We needed people to do the work that the people who were here didn't want to do, sort of like today. And so, look, Italians were prejudiced against. They were called WAP. They were called, you know, all sorts of names. But they persevered. I think a lot of it was the strength of the family. And they knew that there was discrimination against them on the outside, but they built a strong family structure. And then the next generation, as has happened in so many cases, in so many nationalities that have come here, the next generation improved their education. The next generation was, you know, getting PhDs and running Wall Street. And, you know, it just, that's the way, the beauty of America is that the people that came really sacrificed themselves for their children.
Thank you. Somebody wanted to know if the other ports besides Ellis Island had the extensive record keeping that Ellis Island did.
Everybody had the record keeping, and all the records are available at the National Archives. We are in the process of putting the records from the other ports. We've been slowed by COVID, needless to say. We were planning to have it done at the end of this year. I don't think we will. But at some point in the not so distant future, we will have records of all the records from all the ports.
That would be great. And in one database. That
in one database.
Accessed by anybody.
Yeah.
Great. That would
for
be
free.
And free. Say that again.
For free.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can buy a copy of them, but you can see it for free.
Yeah. You know, one of the stories that my family tells, my mother used to tell the story of her mother coming to America at about 12 or 13 years old and waving from the boat to her mother, knowing that they would never see each other again. That, you know, how many, that happened thousands and thousands and thousands of times. What courage these people had.
They had amazing courage. When I think about taking a trip, I have a hotel reservation, a plane ticket. You know, everything is prepared. It wasn't prepared for them. They didn't know what they were getting into. They heard good things from this country, from their relatives who had come before them, but somebody had to be the first one. So somebody took a dare and came. But it's an amazing story. It isn't, we think of it today as a romantic story. It wasn't. It wasn't for the people who were doing it.
Right.
But it turned out pretty well for the rest of us, didn't it?
Yeah. Now, there's another great movie, The Golden Door, that really
Yes.
tells a lot about this process.
Yes.
Somebody wondered if Providence served as a port.
Providence probably did. I don't think it was a major port, but it probably did because there are ports. We have a list of one of the exhibits at Ellis Island, and it lists ports on the Mississippi River where one person came.
Wow.
So my guess is that Providence was probably a pretty good port because it was a shipping port. So we will look at the exhibit at Ellis Island and tell you, and we'll be able to tell you how many people landed in Providence in the year 1903.
Wow. They probably all ran in the same fashion. I mean, if Ellis Island had doctors and some overnight accommodations and things like that, the other ports probably did as well. Yes.
Yes, they did. They did. But because they didn't have as many people, they might not have needed as many bunks or dormitories.
Right. Well, we've had about eight or 10 questions, and we have one more coming in. Let me check this. And okay, so I just learned from one of our great Italian American citizens in Rhode Island that he says 50,000 Italians came to the port of Providence on the Fabre line.
50,000.
50,000. Yep.
Over what period of time?
He doesn't say that, but I'll bet we could do a little bit of research and probably found that out probably in the same time period as, you know, 1880s to 1920s, I would guess.
Oh, yeah. That
But-
would be the time period.
Yeah, 1810 to 1830, early.
Suzanne, if you would ask one of our people at Ellis to look at that big map. It's in the second floor east,
Yep.
and it shows where people came from in 1903.
Yeah, will do. I'll email that to you, Lou.
Okay, thank you. And somebody else notes, Stephen, this is interesting. I didn't think about this, but that many Italians coming to Providence used a particular address as their destination. And would that be a reason how they could make their connection here?
You know, Lou, I've never heard that before, but it very well could be.
Maybe a clearinghouse or something like that?
Maybe it was a clearinghouse of sorts, because there were immigrant aid societies.
Yeah,
Every nationality had them. Maybe that's what that was.
yeah. He says this address now is right next to a great restaurant in Providence called Caserta Pizza. So that's appropriate.
There you go. They didn't go far, right? Went next door, huh?
Yeah, right. Well, this is wonderful. And I know that, I've been able to maintain some contact with Susan, and I hope that, as we move forward, that if people see the program at another time or think of a question and get it forwarded to me, I can contact you one or both of you and have it answered. It's a hot topic nowadays.
It is a hot topic, and it's a hot hobby.
Yeah.
And everybody should know where they came from.
Yeah, correct. This has been great. Let me see. I think I might have one more. Oh, just somebody says very interesting and enjoyable. Well, thank you. We've got 2 or 3 of those. Thank you for that.
And drop us a line if you come
Thank you.
visit New York. We're open. Come
Oh,
on down.
That'd be great. Thank you. Well, really appreciate this. I know we had to cancel this on January 6th, but as it turns out, this was absolutely wonderful and exactly what we were looking for. Really appreciate it, Stephen and Suzanne. Thank you for putting it together.
Well, thank you for having us.
Take care. Appreciate it.
Good night.